Wow, Dr. Billy Garvey, I loved this episode. This was Thelma and Louise and mental health first aid. What are people going to learn in this episode?
Yeah, so some really, like we're going to talk a lot about the movie. We both seem to really love it, but hopefully in a helpful way and very contextual to a lot of kids out there that are really struggling in adolescence. And this is about the support that people can give for a kid who is struggling in the moment.
Yeah.
So educators, parents, how do we help and hold these kids when they're really distressed?
Yeah, I think people are really great at like that first initial seconds, but like there's so much in here in how you kind of see the kid through it a lot. And I learned so much more, particularly around validating feelings and learning about it and not just giving solutions, which I do constantly and do poorly. So that was awesome. Also, Billy, in this episode, you do shout out, we are looking for a social media partner for people that may have capacity to help support. We've got great support from AV1 with all of the video and recording equipment and editing, and we love that. It's just we've got a capacity pinch point coming up as Annalise returns to work, and we need some help with the social media where we can. So if you have that capacity, please reach out to us. Don't hesitate. That's via popcultureparenting@gmail.com or popcultureparenting on Instagram. Guys, enjoy the episode.
Hi, I'm Billy, a developmental paediatrician.
And I'm Nick, a developing parent.
We're going to use scenes from iconic movies to talk about how we best support our kids.
This is Pop Culture Parenting.
Hey, don't let your mother smell that beer on your breath. She'll take it out on me.
I don't want to see you again for the rest of my whole life. I don't want to see anybody else either.
Who is your daddy and what does he do?
Just use your best judgment. We trust you.
Good morning, Dr. Billy Garvey. How are you?
Good. I'm good, Nick. How are you going?
I'm well rested and feeling great this morning.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, I only have sort of one or two wake-ups a night at the moment, but they're quick, they're swift, so it's not too bad.
Yeah.
How about you? How are your nights going?
Good, yeah. So Evie's in her own bed now, which is amazing. I was like, this is going to be a big thing, and then she was like, no, I'm cool with this. And I was like, oh, this is more about me thinking it was going to be a big thing. And but she just at the moment, like just at midnight, 1 a.m, just like screams like, ah! And yeah, we'll cover it maybe in the Griswold, but mainly for mummy. And but then settles and is fine. But I don't know about you, I'm just not very good at going from like, oh my God, is she okay, to I'll just calmly fall back asleep.
No, it's not. I always sort of joke around, like try and explain to colleagues like what happens before 9 o'clock, before they start the day. And like a lot of the time it's my 3-year-old peeled off me at daycare. Like peeled off me. Like not actually, probably not as tough as some other parents do it, I reckon, but pretty... Like I find it tough, but like, and then you're like, oh, now I've got to switch on the Teams and start having a conversation about a strategic thing we're trying to do. And you're like,
just bury that memory.
Just bury that memory of that child screaming as I left. And you're like, okay, let's go.
I know, it's hard, isn't it? I really struggle with that because you'd be like, find that it had come to your mind throughout the workday. And you're just like, oh my God. So no, but yeah, how have you been?
Yeah, good. Totally fine. I reckon we get into our Winslows and Griswolds. How about a roll of dice with the music to see which one comes up first?
Well, do you know, because I think I know what you've got. Can you give me, let's end on a high. Can you give me Grizzy?
Okay, Grizzy.
Hey, don't let your mother smell that beer on your breath. She'll take it out on me.
So yeah, my Griswold is going to be a bit long. But people may or may not have realised, we joke about it a bit, but there is no team behind the cameras and there is a team now helping me with video and audio production, but socials have really kicked off lately. And I've gone from almost drowning to definitely drowning. And I think I've mentioned this to you before, but I chat to Annalise about it. I just feel like a hypocrite because I like roll home from work, gone for 10, 11 hours, and then give Annalise a chop out for an hour while she runs the dog. It's the time I have with my kids, and then I get back into doing all the work behind the scenes for the pod. And I've been kind of really drowning in it lately. And I had this kind of realisation. Annalise is like, Billy, things are really tough. So twice now in the last month, she's taken the kids for a week to help me catch up. Mm-hmm. And both times it's actually been harder. So
how's that work?
Well, because Annalise is doing more than all the parenting. So I ran out of food. I ran out of clean clothes. I was like, I don't know if you've had this. I was like everyone's like, why don't you just get Uber Eats? that's fine, but all my neighbours know Annalise is gone. And so I'm like having this shame of like Uber Eats delivering dinner that they're like, this guy can't even, I haven't cooked a meal since Charlie's been born. I've been doing this, I haven't been like just absolutely drowning. I'm not sipping cocktails and playing video games. I'm like working till midnight. Anyway, and then the second night, I was like, I can't get Uber Eats again. So I was like looking at all the satchels in the cupboard, like, you know.
Did you have like a cup of soup?
No, you know, like the baby stuff, like it's the satchels, you know, apple and cinnamon. I'm like, how many of those could count as a meal? So anyway, absolutely drowning. I have in the past, but I just waited for it to be dark and then called Uber Eats. So I was like, the neighbours won't notice.
You're starving.
It's pitch black.
It's daylight savings here.
But it's wild. And so just drowning a bit, which is kind of where the shout out comes from. Our socials have just kicked like crazy lately. It's hard not to take it personally, considering everyone came to the table to help me out. And ever since, we're getting like over 250,000 views on some of our vids.
Yep.
But it's just, so apologies to all those people I haven't got back to. If anyone out there has any social media comms and would like to be part of it, ideally partnership like the amazing AV1 guys, but also I'm happy to pay for people who have expertise that can take a bit of weight off my shoulders, because people might know this. The podcast is, and you know this, the podcast is not trying to be a successful podcast. It's trying to help all the families they see in clinic get support sooner. It's also become this thing that a lot of professionals kind of seek help about. And that's what I do professionally. I just do it with families waiting years. And we'll talk a little bit about this on this really important topic today. But if the ways that you can help is if you have that expertise, please reach out, or you work in a company that might be interested in a partnership. Also, the social enterprise, which to the frustration of our mortgage broker runs at a loss, brings all the funding in. So you've mentioned this before. You've actually come and seen me do it before. If you're in a corp and would like me to come and do a talk, if you're in a school and want to do some PD, I get to do it a lot. I love it. All of it comes back in and funds the podcast to keep going, because in a month, Annalise is back at work doing 14-hour shifts, and she's been a phenomenal support of just letting me do this and chase this, but that's the only way it'll be sustainable beyond our Christmas ep.
A very fair shout out.
So, yeah, it's great. But my Winslow, can you give me...
I'll give you some winning.
Yeah, because I know you...
I don't object to fun. I love fun. In fact, I'm the grand funk master of fun.
Give it to me, Bill.
And I haven't told you this story, but it's a beautiful one.
There we go.
So I was up in Sydney for pretty much 24 hours of madness. I went up and...
Work.
Madness. Not like end of the season. Party. Sorry, Annalise. Really have to let off some steam. Anyway, so I went up there, flew up, and, you know, late one night in the morning was like breakfast radio, amazing, like Whipper Fitzy and Kate. That was amazing. Loved doing that. Meetings all day about like how we can make this social enterprise hum a bit more and get better reach to people. Did the Hamish Blake podcast. I think we finished up about 11 p.m. and I was just done. I had a meeting in Sydney at CBD the next morning and then was flying back. And I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, what a hypocrite. I'm talking about how important it is to spend time with your kids. This is kind of about me more than it's about a lot of other stuff, feeling really selfish. And I'm just at the lights in Sydney and this bloke taps me on the shoulder and goes, Billy? And I'm like, turn around, you know me. I'm like, love this stuff. He's like, hey, my name's Sean. And he's like, I just want to say, like, I've got a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I listened to the podcast, and you and Nick have just like changed my life with parenting. And I was just like, then got to walk with him for a few blocks. Lovely young guy. Just talked about how helpful it is and all this stuff. And it's funny because then I was like, man, that's why I do it. And all the meetings, the messages that come in keep us going. But I'm cruising like after that, I think it was the next day, and one of our DMs, which I also haven't been able to reply to, was his partner, Sue, who's like, just so you know, he's not on socials, but he was just pumped. He's like, you, Nick, and I'll probably mispronounce this guy's name, but he's like, you, Nick and Max Gawn are the only people he'd actually stop. So I was like, oh, he's we're pumped to hear that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Melbourne captain.
Yeah, so shout out to Sean. So those are my two Grizzlies and Winslows. You've got a Winslow.
I've got a Winslow. My Winslow actually involves you and another one of our best mates who was down from Sydney. So we got to spend an afternoon recently with all the kids together at our house, and it was fantastic. So we mentioned this listener. I think we mentioned this bloke more than any other
He's the only
time.
one of our mates.
Every cop's a mention.
We've
So-
just got one friend.
We just got one. And he lives in another state. It's me and Billy and one other bloke. But it was so nice to have him over. I'd never had his kids to my house down from Sydney, and it was just beautiful. Watching the kids play together and look after themselves is really nice. And I got some great photos of the little ones, which was really cute too. So
There's nothing better.
Daisy and Charlie, yeah, just like beautiful, like just great memories captured, and you know, all in the space of 2.5 hours, all crammed in there and a meal. So no, that was probably my biggest Winslow for the last fortnight.
Yeah, I reckon it was a highlight of a fortnight for me as well. So
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, Billy,
Yeah.
we are here today with a huge film from the early 90s, 91, Thelma Louise. And we've already introed it at the start, but it's Thelma Louise and Mental Health First Aid.
Yes. So what did you think on the rewatch? What does this movie mean to you?
I got to come clean. I'd never watched it.
Wow. Wow. That's great though, because
Yeah.
first rewatch.
I'd watched
First
it.
watch,
I
yeah.
reckon I think I had watched it in two. I reckon I'd probably in totality watched it more than once, but like as in parts. I'd always have caught half because, you know, in the 90s you used to be able to see half a film, and then when it came on again 2 years later you'd watch it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I star-studded cast, which got me. I hadn't realised, and I remember there was a very young Brad Pitt in there. But Michael Madsen and Harvey Keitel, which is just kind of as they're doing their Reservoir Dogs thing. So Michael Madsen doesn't seem to change. He's got that sort of darkness to him that you're kind of watching. But yeah, amazing film, amazing. Made me feel a bit uncomfortable at stages as well, particularly the way. Yeah, it was. I think men were portrayed really badly and they were behaving really badly in it as well. And I was like, oh God, that was a rough period. Like, you know, and probably all that sort of stuff probably happens today, unfortunately, as well. But I was like, yeah, it was the authorities and whatnot. It was a tough watch.
Yeah, it's intentionally a tough watch. So Callie Khoury wrote this in the late 80s, and she was actually a music video producer who thankfully found Ridley Scott, and he saw the screenplay, which won an Oscar, and phenomenal piece of literature, the screenplay, about the reality and the failure of women's rights. And that's really what it's portraying two things. So I'm always trying to find a movie that I can have a scene and can thematically put through the whole movie, the topic, which is mental health first aid. So it's this beautiful, honest portrayal of the realities of where feminism hasn't, you know, succeeded where it should have, of equality and rights. And you see that. You see these two characters in Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon who are, you know, for no fault of their own, have ended up because of how unfair the world is. And as you've said, it's still like this for women. You have Susan Sarandon, who is, you know, so my mum was a feminist, you know, she's loved this movie. I see her in that character. She was a waitress, single parent. Susan Sarandon is a really fiercely independent woman. We hear later she's had this trauma. You know, she doesn't want to go through Texas. We know why it triggered her when Gina Davis's character was getting raped. Gina Davis is this doting wife, you know. She's Chris McDonald, or whatever his name is, Shooter McGavin, is like this cartoonish, you know, terrible husband who we know is out seeing other women, and she's doing everything right. And still the world fails her. You know, and what we see is they're trying to get control, which is what we're going to talk about in mental health first aid. And what actually happens for those people, what is it, how many years ago is this movie now?
91, 32.
Yeah, so 30, hopefully it's not a spoiler, but it doesn't end well. And
Famously.
the reason is because of a lot of what both women experience is what a lot of kids I see in clinic experience, which is hopelessness. They are hopeless to any possible future where everything isn't awful. And that's what we know happens to a lot of the dysfunctional thinking and mental illness. The movie is a really amazing portrayal of that, because you see, as you've spoken about, who's the only male that's actually positive?
And he comes full circle. I think Michael Madsen is wholly positive. Harvey Keitel is also good, but has moments as well. So take your pick.
Yeah, Keitel, I think, is the positive influence. He has what we're going to talk about, some empathy and genuineness in the way that he engages with both Thelma and Louise, and he's trying to connect with them and understand them. On the phone call, he's trying to get to them. He doesn't want the cops to go, and he doesn't want them pointing guns, all that stuff. But he's actually powerless. And that's what we see from the feminist perspective is that, even people who are trying to help are powerless. And a lot of what we're talking about, non-mental health professionals today feel powerless in supporting people. Mads and I agree with you. The only thing is, if you watch him closely, he's very quick to hostility when he's unsure about stuff, and he blows up. And it's interesting because Madsen actually got offered the role of the rapist but refused to do it.
Yeah.
He's like, I can't play that role.
Yeah.
And it's an intentionally uncomfortable scene, watching that scene with Gina Davis. And I think they've done it really well. I find myself really uncomfortable in that moment, and that's intentional to say this is the experience of what happens when women experience these awful traumatic events.
The other thing there's obviously the really obvious traumatic, horrible scenes where there's often Thelma and Louise are in them with guys, but it's the ones that really kind of made it worse were the ones where they weren't present. So it was a lot of like, when she calls, just compliment her, like do these things, like to keep her on the line. And I was like, oh, you know what women like? They like this, talk to them like this. And I was like, oh, it was just, that was almost worse than not worse than,
No, but
it was like,
Callie Curry intentionally did that. And it's interesting because Ridley Scott has a bit of a history of supporting, this with casting Ripley in Aliens as a female. Sigourney Weaver, amazing casting where he's like, it should be a woman, this first like action hero female that we see. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you bring up Brad Pitt. This was his first big role, launched him into stardom.
Yeah.
But he's a false hero, isn't he?
Yeah.
So Hans Zimmer, who did the music, says that there's a 15-minute cut of the sex scene, and he's like, it's phenomenal. It's like, okay, it's just Gina Davis and Brad Pitt rolling around. And he's like, it's amazing. They obviously didn't use it. It's about a minute long, the real one. But even at the same time, when Susan Sarandon and Michael Madsen's character, Susan Sarandon was like, I don't want it to be a sex scene. And it's intentionally not a sex scene of their departure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We're going to use a scene. Brad Pitt steals their money, and is truly proves that he's a false saviour and he's not a real cowboy that's coming in white to save them, because he's actually still a selfish kind of...
And Keitel, I love the way that Keitel stamps that, where he's like, do you reckon they would have gone and done that thing if you hadn't done that? I don't feel like I'm ruining the film, even though a lot of people have probably seen it. And I was like, it stamps it. The one thing I just did want to say is this: the evolution of Gina Davis. I'm not sure if you're going to touch on it or not, but she is this doting housewife sort of thing, and just finds her feet and just becomes physically becomes a lot like Brad Pitt's character with the denim shirt that she then takes on, and the tuck in, and the whole she becomes wild in a sense, alive for the first time. And I love watching that evolution.
And then she says it, doesn't she? You're right. I wasn't going to mention that, but it is a beautiful point, where she's like, something's in me's changed. I can't go back. Because what's the difference between her and the JD character? Because you're right, she mimics him. She holds up a store using the script that he gives her.
Yeah,
says, this is how I held up a store, and he does it.
The hair just changed. She goes from this long locks to up in a thing, and she's just bad. When they blow up the tanker, it's really cool.
Yeah. But she's a woman. That's why she can't. And it's this interesting portrayal of a road movie, because America was seen as this land of freedom, but they're actually trying to get out of America and into Mexico, because that's the only place that's going to be safe for women that have actually stuck up for themselves. So it's a really important. Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon weren't the first picks for this. I don't know if you know.
Who was for Gina Davis? Because
Jodie Foster and Michelle Pfeiffer, and both of Jodie Foster especially really regrets not taking the role, but she went on and did Silence of the Lambs, which won Best Picture. This got Best Screenplay. Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon were nominated for this, neither of them got it. But it's the first time, and maybe the only time since, that both females in a movie have been nominated for the lead. And then Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn wanted to do it.
Would have been comic.
Yeah, well, they were saying Meryl Streep is too serious to play Susan Sarandon's character. And
Goldie's too.
Yeah,
The one thing I'd say about Gina is I got this when such a greater appreciation of Gina Davis. I hadn't watched the film; it's been around for 32 years. But I've watched, Long Kiss Goodnight and a lot of other stuff that I love that she's in.
Yeah, Long Kiss. We're going to do that.
I've got to find a way to do Long.
It's a great balance of
because that's post this, and she's real. Another show that she could be a badass in this, and she goes on to be that as well in that. But I had this real sense that I felt like she could have, even though Julia Roberts is the perfect person for Pretty Woman, I just felt like Gina had that in her in a sense. Like I don't know. I was like, because I then Googled, like, did she pass? Because I remember we talked about a lot of people that passed on roles for Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
Like Robert De Niro had passed in Gear's role, and I couldn't remember who the other female leads were, but it was, I don't know, I was just like, wow, Gina Davis was in, I thought she was so amazing in this film.
I 100%. It's amazing because Annalise and I watched it
just
when I'm checking it, and I was like, it just reminds me of Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
This scene with Gina Davis, this section in it with her, but she's almost like a more honest Pretty Woman.
Yeah,
and it's it's just great. So no, I love it. And the final bit on the movie, I don't know if you know that the ending scene, we'll obviously come back to it and weave it through, but the ending scene, there was an alternate ending. I don't know if you know, where it was a bit more realistic, because the ending scene, for people who, without ruining it, they go off in flying. You know, they're flying at the end, and they go off on a high. But there's a scene actually where you watch the car plummet, and it ends on Keitel watching the fiery crash. Like, you don't see the fiery crash, you just see his response. And that was the big criticism. Like, Playboy hated this movie because they were like, this is what feminists want. They want to just kill all men. And, you know, this is why we can't let them have the power. And it was crazy. Multiple articles in Playboy in the 90s about how bad this movie is and how anti-feminist they were. And then, you know, Ridley Scott was criticised a little bit for using a cut that was pulled the punch a bit. That was one of the criticisms.
I had that, to be honest. I had that, like, I was like, oh, no, show the... Yeah,
totally. Because
had, like,
I think
the ending like Grease. I was like,
yeah, that's I never
because they hadn't pulled any punches to that point. Then they really did, and I was like, I could see both ways.
But that right before that bit where she's like, if anyone goes back and just watches one scene, watch when Gina Davis says, "Let's go over the cliff." It's phenomenal acting, and where they kiss each other and go is just amazing. Like it's just phenomenal. So anyway, I could spend the whole episode.
I don't reckon we've ever talked so much about a single film.
Well, it's a phenomenal movie. Yeah. It's it means a lot to me personally. I think it is a great portrayal of mental illness, hopelessness, loss of control. These two women who just feel like they're backed into a corner, and we know we're going to talk about it's really important that you don't back kids into corners.
Okay, talk to me. What is mental health first aid?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about it in almost two different ways. I'm going to talk about, I'm really lucky that I was part of building a course for mental health first aid for children by a national body that does this, amazing team of researchers. Anyone who goes and does that training will see some video footage of me at Abbotsford Convent, actually. We filmed it, talking about all this stuff. But I promise I won't double up too much. So if you've done that, don't stop listening if you've done that training. But what mental health first aid, it's a bit like first aid. It's about what are the skills that we can give to people to support, you know, children and adolescents that are in distress, either until professional help arrives, someone like me, or until the issue resolves. And it's really important.
So it's not the window post can be a bit longer, as in, like, so if you break your arm, I wait till the ambos get here or take you to the hospital, fix it. But you're like, this can actually be useful over weeks or months to actually keep people
definitely up, so the person
up.
You know, and a lot of the advocacy that I'm trying to do is about it's not weeks, months until the ambulance comes. And my clinic, some of them, it's over 2-year wait. So which is an important point actually I should have said earlier. You know, it's very hard to get to me. It's almost impossible to specifically get to me. It's amazing people reach out about this, but this episode is going to be trying to do what you can do until you get to someone like me.
It's like triaging.
Yeah, it's a bit triaging, and it's also keeping kids safe and trying to return them to calm. Now, we talked about in the co-regulation app with young kids and the really dysregulated kids how we can do that. I can't remember the movie off the top of my head, but which is terrible. But Jurassic Park, and this is going to be more about what you can do with older kids, the approach, the relational practice aspect of it, and all those things. So, two different overlays. Now, this is really important because we might have mentioned on the podcast before, you know, 1 in 7 or 14% of Australian kids aged 4 to 17 years of age has a mental illness over a 12-month period in this country. We get a lot of amazing overseas listeners. Shout out to them. Similar devastating rates. In Australia, we know the majority of those kids will never see a professional mental health clinician like me. You know, 21% of them will see someone like me. 7% of them will see a child psychiatrist. 35% of them see a general practitioner, the most important specialists out there.
So what you're saying is, so just so I'm clear on that, 14% of kids have a mental health illness that is in excess of 12 months. So they have it for like depression.
Sorry, over a 12-month period, 14% of kids in the population will have a mental illness.
Gotcha.
A lot of young kids. And we know, I think I've said this to you before on the pod, 50% of adult mental illness starts in childhood.
Yeah.
Half of it.
Yeah.
Like this is why I do this work.
This is why you do
catch
this work.
these kids and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So this is about when we've identified the kid that's struggling, what we can do. And we're going to kind of step through that. And then in the follow-up episode, we'll go really deep on certain elements of it. Now, this can be used for really kids that are aggressive, kids that are self-harming, kids that are suicidal. This is like an approach that can help people that don't have the clinical expertise, but they have something more important to help these kids. The more important thing they have is they have a trusting relationship with these kids. So if you're a parent or an educator, what this is trying to do is complement the trust that you have with the individuals you care about that are distressed in a way that is evidence-based and can support them in the way that you respond to them.
Okay, so the best person to deliver mental health first aid is someone that is trusted by the child.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Why is that?
So, well, why do you think it is? Imagine you're really distressed and strangers walking past you and you're having a meltdown on the street, you've just found out some awful news, or you're having a really bad day and you're really overwhelmed. Yeah.
I just was as soon as I asked the question, I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
No, but the interesting thing is I'm that stranger for a lot of kids.
You are. So how do you do it?
So you build trusting relationships. Okay. So that's why.
Is that part of this first aid?
Yeah, it can be. Okay. Like ideally you proactively do that. But the way, it's really important that one of the first steps we think about before we go anywhere near a child who's in significant distress is we think about, as we've talked about with all this stuff, how am I going? Am I ready to go approach this child? So, but we're not going to spend much time on that because we've done that a lot in the past. But you also think about, am I the right person to be approaching this child? Now, if you're the only person, that's not an option.
You are the appropriate person.
Yeah, so if you're the only one, the kid's melting down, there's a risk of like self-harm, hurting themselves, hurting other people, you have to go in. With the older kids that you're noticing they're significantly distressed, it's really important that you think, is there someone else around here who's got a more trusting relationship? Or can I actually speak to them, get a bit of information and say, hey, I reckon Nick's really struggling. I've noticed that. I'm going to go over and have a chat with him. What do you reckon? Am I the best person to do that? Are you a better person? You got any tips to help me connect with him? Like all that stuff. And you might find, because what we're going to learn is that every child and adolescent is different in how you connect with them. But what we're going to talk about is general principles of how you do this safely and effectively. It's really important as well, what we've spoken about, maybe we'll just touch on this quickly, is that the relational expertise, a trusting bit that you have in connecting with these kids is important. It's also really important to have a good understanding of mental illness. So maybe I'm putting you on the spot a bit here. How do we know what signs will kids and adolescents demonstrate to show us that they're struggling mentally? Are they going to come up and say, I'm really depressed?
No, they're not. They're going to be, so for depression, I think that's a low mood for more than 2 weeks.
Bang. Yeah. Mate, diploma coming your way.
A low mood for more than a period of 2 weeks for depression.
Yeah.
Anxiety.
How else can they show? That's one of the 2 core features.
Yep. Lack of contact.
Lack of interest in previous things they've enjoyed.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, amazing. Yeah, great. And, anxiety, we know there's this excessive fear or worry. So let's kind of meld them both because this is the 2 most common things that we see in this cohort. So great. The other thing is agitation. Agitation, including for teenagers, is the way that they often will show us because they're really agitated and they're really frustrated and easily tipped over at the edge. A lot of them will withdraw and internalise. A lot of them will have excessive guilt. They'll feel worthless. A lot of them just don't see hope like we see with Gina and Susan's characters. They'll also kind of show us through problems with, concentrating, with sleep, with appetite. Even adolescents, I've always got a headache, I've got tummy pain. And they've kind of, from that agitation, we also get just a lack of energy. So those are the signs. And as you've spoken about, change in kids shows us that they're struggling in adolescence. And that's the reason to go in with mental first aid strategies. Obviously, also the kid that's really, really struggling and has become violent in school or whatever, this approach is also applicable for them. So am I the right person? Have I got a good information? And then the other thing before you go in is thinking about one of the most important things I'm about to do is not be judgmental. and think about my own bias. And if you're going, this kid's kicking up a fuss over nothing, you've got to get that out of your head, because these kids will sense that. They will kind of go, you're dismissing this, you're diminishing my experience, you're telling me it's okay, come on, mate, toughen up, it's all right, we'll get through it together.
Okay, got to air my guilt here, because that's tip. So we've talked about this in the past. So I will do that occasionally when I want to dismiss what's going on, because I don't want it to bubble up into a bigger thing.
Yeah.
Just being honest,
mate. That's why you're amazing. Because you are honest, and that's the experience of a lot of.
Sorry, I'm cutting you off, but also in the same sense of like when they fall over and you look at them and you're like, and you sort of say, we've said this past, like, don't go over, like, let them correct themselves. Like, don't build it up, don't blow it up.
Yeah, so we'll see that fail in a scene that we're going to use, but it often fails as well, because the risk is the kid further escalates, or the risk is the kid doesn't see safety in the response that you're giving them.
Cool. All right, that's
so
what I'm
you're
doing.
talking about, don't get me wrong, the low-level stuff, they trip, whatever, they're upset because they didn't get the ice cream and all that stuff. But what we're talking about now is like all those symptoms that we've talked about. Signs a kid is anxious, signs a kid is depressed, signs a kid is at risk of really deteriorating mental illness. And what we're talking about now is what you can do to either help that resolve or hold them and keep them safe, which is one of the big priorities of mental illness. Keep them safe until the professional support comes into place.
And you don't mean hold them physically, you mean hold them in a reasonable...
No, we'll talk about that, because, let's go into that. What do you do when you get to them? So how do you approach them?
So they're like distressed, crying.
Yeah, melting down. Let's think about the teenager, who's, just gone crazy in the classroom, throwing stuff all, throwing a chair through the window. He said, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to, do this. I'm going to do that. Everyone's run out of the classroom. What do you think it looks like going into that? You're the educator.
I've never seen...
Most important professionals.
Does that happen? I've never seen...
In the community.
That's scary. So
happens all the time. Teachers are dealing with that more and more.
Really?
They've got less and less support. Yeah.
All right. I am naive. I don't have kids in school. Okay. So in that moment...
so you've done the bits we talked about. You've thought about, am I the right person?
Yeah.
Is there someone else that's better? Yeah. What's my own bias? How am I feeling? And you're going into them. Yeah. What do you reckon?
Slowly.
What's important? Perfect.
Eye contact.
Eye contact, yep. So not overly sustaining it, but still eye contact. What else do you reckon?
Voice.
Calm voice.
Low
Amazing.
voice.
Low voice is good too.
Hey, Billy.
Yeah.
Hey, Billy.
What are you trying to do first?
Establishing rapport.
Yeah, connect.
Connect. Yep. Trying to connect with them.
Yeah. What are we saying?
Not
judging
them.
Okay?
I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm here, Billy. I'm here, mate.
Yeah.
I'm here. And then they're probably not interested, or just be like, tell me. Then I'd be asking questions.
Yeah, what type of questions?
Tell me what's happened.
Yeah, open.
Yeah.
So you don't lead them.
Yeah.
You
don't be like, that was bad, wasn't it?
Why are you asking questions?
Because you want them to talk.
Yeah. Why is that?
Because physically they then have to breathe to talk a little bit more. I don't know.
So really, you're nailing it,
as
mate.
in, like,
it's
if
amazing.
you're talking, you're like, might force them to take a breath and stay here, as opposed to like stop thinking about what's absolutely aggravating them or agitating them after they've thrown the chairs and whatnot.
Yeah. So you're trying to connect with them. You're trying to show them that you're there to support them, and you're trying to understand their experience.
Their experience.
What is that? It starts with an E.
Empathy.
Yeah, I was going to say ends with empathy.
Ends in empathy.
Yeah, so that's empathy. Like, genuine empathy is, I'm here trying to learn what your experience right now is. Yeah. That's genuine empathy. I can't remember if we talked about it. If we've done the Hamish pod. Maybe not, but we should. I did it on the Hamish pod, so I'll give it a bit of space so people don't go, I heard him talk about that already. But so it's really important that you're trying to do that. And a key, what we talk about is helper quality, is empathy. Another helper quality we talked about last episode was quiet enthusiasm. Another one is being genuine. And what do you think? How can you be genuine in that moment?
Honest?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
what would honest be? Kid that's really distressed. What might you say? That's open, that's trying to connect in a calm, low voice.
do want to say you scared me, Billy. No.
You can say that. You can say, look, I'm really worried about you.
I'm really worried about you. Yeah, that'd be honest. Yep.
Yeah, I'm really worried about you. And that's being honest. The other stuff that's really important, we'll get into a bit more of the language, is that when you come in gently. If you're going to go close to someone, especially if you're going to like get near them or hug them or whatever, ask permission. So is it okay if I come
Permission
a bit
for
closer?
physical contact.
Is it okay if I sit down next to you? Sit down next to you is a really good one, because dropping, especially for kids that are smaller than us, dropping to their level or below them is really important. I spent a lot of time over a long time with a lot of distressed kids and adults, and that is a really important connection. Also, don't back them into corners. Don't stand right in front of them. Don't chase them.
I know it sounds silly, but it's exactly what I think would happen.
Yeah, so you only block exits if it's going to run the risk of them running out of the road. But cornering kids shows them that they're not safe and they've lost control, like Thelma and Louise. There's evidence that one thing that can be helpful is you're open. So open hands, palms facing them. I'm here. My hands are down and low. I don't have my guard up. I'm at often 45 degrees to you, so I'm not standing right in front of them. I'm 45, I'm here. I'm trying to understand your perspective, but I'm looking out with you on what's going on.
Yep.
I'm here together. We're next to each other.
Okay.
So it's really important you do that. Now, the most important...
So you're not in confrontation like that.
You're not in
eye
confrontation.
to eye.
You're not
You're
blocking.
like,
Yeah, you're not standing
a
against
more
them.
like this. Yeah, you're not in the way of them.
Yeah, so you're not in the way of them. And then you also think is, the most important bit is not exactly how you do it, it's that you are responsive. And what you want to be trying to watch is, what is their body language showing me? Is this working? They're getting tense. I'm too close. And you can. Now, the lower level intensity distress, not that kid, but a kid that you've been noticing, they're not interested in previous stuff, their sleep's all over the place, they're easily agitated, they're feeling really guilty and worthless. You can also ask permission and go, hey, I'm a bit worried about you. Is it okay if we have a chat? And signalling that is important. Now, they can't forever put it off, but you want to try, if you can, give them some sense of autonomy and control and when that conversation will happen. Now, there's a whole set of helper skills as well in how we do this. You've talked about some of them already. Creating silence. I'm here, I'm genuinely here to listen to you. I'm going to give that space. What we often do, especially people like me, is we just want to fill silence. And we just want to talk. Yeah. We want to fill the space. We feel a bit uncomfortable with silence. But what a lot of these kids need is the chance for there to be silence and you stay present. You're not like, well, you're not going to answer my question straight away. It's really important that when you give empathy, you don't expect it back. So if you think these kids, you're conditional on these kids, unconditional positive regard and support is really important. If you're going to go in and go, he better appreciate me helping him like this. If he doesn't, I'm going to get annoyed or I'm going to get hostile. Don't do it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I do it.
Yeah.
I do it.
Yeah, because you go, I'm breaking out of my day to help. I've just made
it's
this
my
dinner.
attitude.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
It's usually, I just made this breakfast. And when someone storms off
Yeah.
and they're really genuinely upset, I know people like, that's not what we're talking about, Nick. It's like chair throwing in classrooms and kids really say, I'm like, that this, for one of my kids, ends poorly regularly.
Yeah, so you've got to realise.
And I come in with like, well, I've just made pancakes.
Yeah, so your support, which is all of
It's
this,
conditional.
But try and make it not conditional.
Yeah,
not like, well, you need to respond to this exactly how I want you to.
Yeah. No, this is what I'm here to like hear that. So
Yeah. But I'm the same, mate. I'm the same.
No, you're not. I'm saying you're not.
Believe me, I've got enough flaws. But yeah, and and it's also, so other things, active listening. I'm 100% here. So I'm not in an environment where someone might call me, where I've got to look after other kids. My phone's going to go
Put
in
down
my
the
pocket.
phone.
I've got to check my phone.
Got to put the phone.
Yeah, got to put the phone
Got to
down.
put the phone down.
You cannot deliver mental health first aid if you've got a phone that you're responding to in your pocket at the same time and other stuff. And the principals and wellbeing people at school have taught me this. They're like, this is where you come to have a safe conversation with me whenever you need it for as long as you need it. Like, it's really important. And we can learn this as parents, delivering first aid, mental health first aid to our kids too.
Okay, good. Feeling uncomfortably guilty through a lot of this. I know this stuff now though. Good, let's do it.
Yeah. So I think we're doing really well. I'm trying to think when I need to come in with this scene, because we haven't broken a 2-hour follow-up app yet.
No, I think as well, I always make you a little bit nervous because you don't see it on camera. I'm always looking to make sure everything's recording. And it's particularly when you say something smart. When you say something really good, I'm like, Please tell me I've hit record.
Because we joke a lot. We just do one take.
But this is because this is from previous trauma. We've just done the trauma app when I forgot to hit record that one time, and it is every time. It's like I think you think sometimes, is he bored? He keeps looking around. I'm like, no, just making sure we're getting it.
It's just because when I soapbox, I'm like, have I just done a soapbox and we're running into 2 hours? No. But
okay, so what I am most interested in is seeing this applied with with the scene we've got. That's really helpful. So can we actually go to it? Because I think the summary on this is going to be really important. You've covered a lot of really great areas there, but like this feels like CPR. This is a grab bag of tactics we need as parents, educators, carers to be able to do this stuff. So I'm keen to see how you apply it. And then at the end, maybe we get like a little summary, like just how to attack it.
And we'll do the second half of what we're talking about because we went into early conversation, but we'll do the scene, practically apply it. I'm going to ask you to practically apply it. And then I'll do the back half of what we can do.
Okay. All right.
So setting the scene.
Please.
This is halfway through the movie. A lot of people were critical of the Gina Davis character, being physically intimate with someone after they've been sexually assaulted. And it's interesting because we actually, this back then and maybe still, what she's actually proving is a significant trauma response that we see in a lot of patients in clinic is that she has been traumatized and she's trying to assert control again. She's trying to say, I'm in charge of my body. I make decisions. That person is not going to determine my future. And we see that a lot of time kids and adolescents will not completely avoid something that's traumatized them because they're still trying to exert control. So that's the scene that has just happened. She's just hooked up with Brad Pitt, JD, the false cowboy. This is where we learn he's a false cowboy. Susan Sarandon has asked Michael Madsen to give money. It's actually her money. He's not saving her. He's just saying, look, I'll give you my cash. She can't access hers in the bank because they're on the run. This is going to be their saviour. This is how they're going to get across the border into Mexico and survive all the trauma and, the unfair consequences that are coming. And Gina Davis has just come into the breakfast place and said it's amazing. Susan Sarandon goes, where's the cash? Susan Sarandon's just come into the hotel room Gina Davis was in and found that the money is gone. The $7,000 or whatever that was going to save them is gone, and everything now is truly hopeless. And you're going to hear Susan Sarandon breaking down and Gina Davis trying to support her.
Yeah, and clearly they're on the run after murdering a person as well, if you haven't seen the film. So they're really on the run. Yeah, cool. Go to the scene.
Louise. You okay? Louise. I'm sorry, I mean it. Louise, it's okay.
No, Thelma, it's not okay. It's definitely not okay. None of this is okay. I mean, what are we gonna do for money? Huh? How are we gonna get gas? I mean, trade on our good looks. I mean, oh, God damn, Thelma, it's not okay.
Louise. Hey, now you listen to me. Don't you worry about it. You hear me? Come on. Stand up. Louise, just don't you worry about it. You hear? Come on. Come on, damn it. Get your stuff. Let's get out of here. Move! Jesus Christ, come on. Come on. Oh, take your damn time. Come on. Here we go.
What do you think?
Yeah, it doesn't nail it.
It's interesting if you made Susan Sarandon a little kid, Gina Davis a parent.
Yeah.
It's not completely alien.
Oh, that's not completely alien.
Melting down on the floor. You're okay.
You're okay. You're okay.
Get up.
Get up.
Come on.
That's the supermarket, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like it's usually,
So what do you think? Let's talk about things that she could have done better.
Yeah. So could have done better is probably check yourself first heading in. and just making sure you're ready for sort of what's in there, which was hard because it's just happened. And she is to blame for some of what's happened. Well, a lot of what's happened in the scene. I think she immediately goes to telling her it's okay and forget about it, like it's okay, as opposed to asking questions. She doesn't do all the things we talked about, like to build empathy, physically moving her as opposed to like trying to get a little bit closer to her physically to get her to talk. And that's the thing that triggers Louise is like she keeps telling her it's okay and it's fine as opposed to asking questions. And then she just fires back at her, it's not okay, none of this is okay. This is all horrible and terrible. And which in that moment it is pretty bad.
So what should she have done?
She should have let her talk a little bit more because she just talks over her and through her the whole time.
So there's a chance there, isn't it? And a lot of people that try to do this will realise it's so hard because they won't even talk to me. Yeah,
and she just fills the air with words, not move her so quickly. But on the run, so it's all a bit hard. Just basically, and then she got quite aggressive, and she tried to joke as well about it. Tried to crack a gag halfway through. Like, God, you're so slow. Come on. Like in a joking way.
Yeah, and I think we've all done that. We've tried to use humour to kind of shift kids out of mental states that they're in.
Because kids can shift a little bit when you do that.
Yeah.
It's a cheap trick.
And the responsiveness, if that trick works and they're actually okay and they resolve and they settle, fine. But clearly this is not the appropriate time. And I think what she should have done is, she's got her talking, keep her talking. Try and understand her perspective, get down and sit next to her.
Yeah.
Sit down on the ground with her and provide comfort to her. This is a person that she really trusts and a safe relationship. Be responsive, be caring and be soothing, and try and understand her perspective through the language she gives back to you. What we should be trying to find is, a shared understanding with the kids that are struggling and not say, why, you don't explicitly say why you're feeling like this, but saying, I can see how distressed you are. And try and open questions, what can I do to help? What's going on? What can I do to support you? And asking those things and not leading them down certain ways. Would it be helpful if I did this specific thing is not very good because you're giving them a binary decision where they either say no because that specific thing isn't helpful or they'll say yes and it's actually not the beneficial thing that they can do. The other thing is, when we try and find that shared language, I think you're really frustrated because you feel like our lives are over, the world is hopeless, the money's gone, and we're done now. And, she would have said, and just sitting with that is really important for a lot of kids that we're with and not going, as we've talked about, straight to fixing it. We don't need to go straight to solutions. There's a therapeutic responsiveness in just saying, you're right. This must feel awful. This is a terrible thing that's happened and that you're experiencing. You don't deserve this to be happening to you. I am here. It's a really important thing to shift away from I need to fix it or I need to dismiss it. That's the only way we're going to get through this. And I think we're always so worried that, validating the experience is going to reinforce that they act like this, they get distressed all the time. But actually what you're showing is one of the most protective things, that you believe them, you are there as a trusting person that's going to journey through that with them. As an educator, as a parent, as anyone who's not a mental health professional, you are more powerful than me in finding paths through this stuff with kids. But the most important first step is I'm here walking it with you, not this is the way out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the bit that resonated most with me there is almost agreeing with them. You did that so well. It's like, this is terrible. And then you shouldn't have to feel this way. That's bad.
Yeah, so you validate this experience and take the blame off it.
Yeah.
A lot of kids with dysfunctional thinking and mental illness think this is all my fault. It's always going to be like this. It's going to permeate through every interaction I have with anyone else. I've been there. I was clinically depressed for 12 months. I was hopeless. I had no control. I sunk into my work.
Yeah.
I used to get to Friday afternoon and hate it because I wouldn't have the safety of my work to sink into. And I still get triggered a bit. I used to be like, amazing, it's Friday afternoon. I used to be devastated and really struggle. It was the hardest time in my week for almost a year. And that's what happens. That's what happens to these guys. They've lost control. They've lost hope. It's what happens to a lot of the kids and teenagers that we look after in our community. And immediately saying there is hope. What are you talking about? The world's great. You're moving past and you're not validating that experience that they're having. And you can make that step, but make it later. Make it when you've made the connection with them, you've showed the shared understanding. And then ask them, what can I do to help? What can we do to make this better? And you might find that when you've created that safe and trusting relationship, you've demonstrated genuineness and empathy, that they do help you together find that problem-solving solution. And then you have to make sure, which a lot of us that are professionals fall down on this bit, we go, this is the way to fix it, and we think about what the strategy is. We don't think about how you'll actually implement it. So we tell a lot of kids, do this, do that, do this. They're not capable of doing it. And I still fail at this. Kids will come back in and I'll go, oh, we made this awesome plan together. They had no way of implementing it. They didn't understand how to implement it. They didn't have the capacity. They didn't have the resources. And a lot of these kids don't have the resources for self-care, for looking after themselves, and they need you to hold their hand. And like we talk about all through this podcast, it is often the reason we fail is our expectation is too high and our support is not enough. And that's what we need to remember. What's a low-level expectation, and I will support you as much as you need to achieve that in recovering from this level of distress. And I'm going to be here with you through that. And that's Gina Davis. I'm being a bit unfair because she's also experienced this trauma. She's also in mental anguish. But we see this beautiful part of their relationship that they're constantly unconditionally supporting each other. They go off the cliff together. The problem is a lot of people go off the cliff with these kids, and that's the challenge. We know that parental mental illness often is devastatingly impacted when your own child has anxiety, depression, is suicidal, is self-harming. And what we've got to find a way is how do we connect, but then find a better path. And that's where professionals come in. So if you find that for 2 weeks, for 4 weeks, things are not getting better, reach out. Like, we're trying to build capacity in the community. This is one way of doing it, but we know how hard it is to get to these professionals. But, you shouldn't feel alone in this, that the only option is to kind of go down that devastating path with kids. So it's really challenging. I think I've probably hit enough now. Well, we're going to talk a lot more in the follow-up episode about, hopefully people will send in specific examples. We'll read them out. A lot of professionals and people on the socials, there's like 0.1% of people that are being a bit agitating, but are sharing their own experience in a really helpful way. Please send in things like that. Your expertise and lived experience is really helpful to our listeners.
Part 2 is absolutely made by our listeners, so your questions are important. If you have a question, don't hesitate to send it through. The one thing is, if you've got it, please send it, because once we do part 2 and record it, we can't come back and really do it in a really good way with a lot of context, just a little bit more difficult. So make sure you drop those questions. Don't hesitate. You can do that via popcultureparenting@gmail.com, or you can do it via popcultureparenting on Instagram. They're the best 2 channels. And look out for the polls on Instagram so that you can just engage with those quickly and do some short fire questions as well. We love those little short fire ones. It's often what people like, that little bit of snack size stuff, Billy. So yeah, perfect place to ask those questions.
Yeah, great. And hopefully that was helpful, but we'll go into it a bit deeper next time.
So helpful.
And we'll go over it all again.
I can't wait to re-listen to particularly the part, the first bit, but particularly that bit just at the end there. I loved your way to navigate the actual, like the crux of it. And I hadn't thought about that validation bit correctly. And like most listeners, I reckon I jump to solutions pretty quick because you got to keep moving, but there's still such a benefit in that validation piece. So yes, looking forward to it already, Dr. Billy Garvey. So thanks very much, guys. Appreciate you listening. Look out for part 2 and make sure you send those questions through. Thank you, Dr. Billy.
Hey, don't let your mother smell that beer on your breath. She'll take it out on me.
I don't want to see you again for the rest of my whole life. I don't want to see anybody else either.
Who is your daddy and what does he do?
Just use your your best judgment. We trust you.